The man who is not afraid to die is also the man who is not afraid to live. And paradoxically, by embracing the uncertainty of life, you discover the only genuine security that exists. You spend your days gripping life so tightly that your knuckles turn white. You plan every detail, control every outcome, fight against every change that threatens your carefully constructed sense of security. But what if the very act of trying to force life into submission is what's causing your deepest suffering? There's something profoundly backwards about how most of us approach living. We chase happiness as if it were a butterfly that could be caught and pinned to a board. We pursue security like it's a fortress we can build high enough to keep all uncertainty at bay. We grasp at love, success, and peace of mind with the same desperate urgency that a drowning person reaches for a life preserver. But here's the truth that most people discover far too late in life. The harder you squeeze, the more everything slips through your fingers. The more you try to save yourself, the more you lose yourself in the process. The more desperately you chase happiness, the more it eludes your grasp. This isn't just philosophical theory. This is the lived experience of countless people who've spent decades running on the hamster wheel of constant striving, only to discover that the wheel was never taking them anywhere meaningful. Those who've weathered life's storms understand that there's a fundamental law at work here, something that goes against everything our achievement-oriented culture teaches us. You've probably felt this backwards law operating in your own life without realizing it. Remember the last time you desperately wanted something to work out, a relationship, a job opportunity, a financial situation. The more you worried about it, planned for it, tried to force it into existence, the more elusive it became. But then, perhaps during a moment when you finally let go and stopped pushing so hard, things somehow fell into place. This pattern repeats itself across every area of human experience. The person who tries too hard to be liked often becomes insufferable. The one who desperately seeks love often drives it away with their neediness. The individual who clutches their possessions too tightly often loses them through their very attempt to secure them. The worker who sacrifices everything for career advancement sometimes finds that their frantic efforts actually hinder their progress. Those who've lived long enough to observe these patterns understand that life operates according to principles that seem to contradict common sense. When you try to hold running water in your cupped hands, it flows away. But when you let your hands rest naturally in the stream, the water flows through them continuously. You cannot have the flow by grasping it. You can only experience it by allowing it. The same principle applies to every aspect of your existence. You cannot capture joy by chasing it relentlessly. You cannot secure love by desperately clinging to it. You cannot force peace by fighting against everything that disturbs you. Yet most of us spend our lives doing exactly these things, wondering why we feel so perpetually frustrated and exhausted. This exhausting cycle of forcing and grasping stems from a deep misunderstanding about the nature of life itself. We've been conditioned to believe that we are separate entities, isolated beings who must constantly struggle against a hostile universe to carve out our small piece of happiness and security. We operate under the illusion that there's a solid, unchanging self that needs to be protected, defended, and satisfied at all costs. But what if this very sense of separation is the root of all your struggles? What if the you that you're so desperately trying to save and secure doesn't exist in the way you think it does? This isn't abstract philosophy. This is a practical recognition that can transform how you experience every moment of your life. When you truly observe your own experience without the filter of concepts and beliefs, something remarkable becomes apparent. You cannot find this separate I that you're trying to protect. When you're listening to these words, can you simultaneously Think about the you who is listening. To think about yourself listening, you must briefly stop the act of listening itself. The watcher you imagine is watching your experience is just another thought, another experience, not a separate entity standing apart from life. This recognition dissolves the fundamental conflict that creates so much suffering. The war between I and my experience simply cannot exist when you realize there is no separate I to begin with. You are not experiencing life. You are life experiencing itself through this particular focal point of consciousness. People who've made this shift describe it as like waking up from a dream where they were constantly fighting themselves. The internal dialogue that once consumed so much energy, the voice that worried, planned, judged, and struggled against reality, loses its grip when you see it for what it truly is. Just another movement in the flow of experience, not the commander of your life. But here's where most people get confused. This isn't about becoming passive or giving up all effort. This isn't about lying down and letting life run over you. True understanding involves a complete reversal of your relationship with effort itself. Instead of forcing life to conform to your will, you begin to align your actions with the natural flow of circumstances. Think of a skilled martial artist who doesn't meet force with force, but redirects the energy of their opponent. Or consider how a master sailor doesn't fight against the wind, but uses it skillfully to reach their destination. This is effort without strain, action without desperate attachment to outcomes. When you stop trying to force your way through life, you discover that you can navigate challenges with far more grace and effectiveness. Problems that once seemed insurmountable begin to reveal unexpected solutions. Relationships that were strained by your need to control begin to flow more naturally. Work that once felt like a constant uphill battle starts to align with your natural rhythms and abilities. This shift requires you to develop a fundamentally different relationship with uncertainty and change. Most of us have been taught to fear these forces, to see them as threats to our security and happiness. We spend enormous amounts of energy trying to predict and control what cannot be predicted or controlled, creating anxiety and exhaustion in the process. But uncertainty and change are not forces of destruction. They are the very conditions that make life possible. Your body is a constant dance of change: circulation, respiration, digestion, cellular renewal. To resist change is like trying to stop your heartbeat. The anxiety that comes from fighting against life's inherent impermanence is like holding your breath and wondering why you feel suffocated. Think about music for a moment. What makes a melody beautiful is not the individual notes, but the way they flow from one to another, each note arising and passing away in perfect timing. If you tried to hold on to a single note to make it permanent, you would destroy the music entirely. The beauty lies in the constant movement, the rhythm of emergence and dissolution. Your life has this same musical quality. Each experience, each relationship, each phase of your journey has its natural rhythm of beginning, developing, and completing. When you try to freeze moments in time to make permanent what is naturally flowing, you create discord instead of harmony. But when you learn to move with the rhythm of change, your life becomes a kind of symphony. Those who've learned to live with this understanding describe a profound sense of relief. Instead of carrying the impossible burden of trying to control outcomes, they can focus their energy on responding skillfully to whatever arises. Instead of exhausting themselves by swimming against the current, they learn to read the water and move with its natural flow. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to what happens in your life. Rather, you develop what might be called relaxed intensity. You care deeply about your actions and choices, but you hold the results lightly. You give your best effort to your work, but you don't tie your self-worth to the outcomes. You love fully, but you don't demand that love take any particular form. The practical implications of this shift are profound. When you're not constantly bracing against life, you have access to far more energy and creativity. When you're not fighting reality, you can see opportunities that were always there, but hidden by your struggle. When you stop trying to be someone other than who you are, you discover that who you actually are is far more interesting and capable than the person you were trying to become. Consider how much mental energy you spend each day worrying about things that might happen, rehearsing conversations that may never occur, and replaying past events you can't change. This constant mental noise isn't just distracting, it's exhausting. It's like trying to listen to beautiful music while someone constantly talks in your ear about what the next song might be or how the last song could have been better. When you stop forcing and start flowing, this mental chatter naturally quiets down. Your mind becomes like a clear lake that perfectly reflects whatever appears on its surface without being disturbed by it. You can think clearly when thinking is needed, feel deeply when emotion arises, and rest in peaceful awareness when neither thought nor feeling is required. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of this understanding is how it changes your relationships with other people. When you're no longer driven by the compulsive need to prove yourself, protect yourself, or get something from others, you can actually see them clearly for the first time. Your interactions become genuine rather than strategic. Your love becomes unconditional rather than transactional. Most of us enter relationships with hidden agendas. We want to be loved, validated, comforted, or entertained. We try to manage how others perceive us, control how they respond to us, and shape their behavior to meet our needs. This turns every interaction into a subtle form of manipulation, even when we have the best intentions. But when you're no longer desperately seeking something from others, you can offer something far more valuable: your genuine presence. You can listen without planning what you'll say next. You can appreciate people as they are instead of trying to change them into what you think they should be. You can love without keeping score or demanding reciprocation. People sense this shift in you immediately, even if they can't articulate what's different. Those who are accustomed to relating to your ego, your fears, insecurities, and needs may initially feel confused or even threatened by your newfound ease. But those who are capable of authentic connection are drawn to the simplicity and presence that emerges when you stop performing and start simply being. This transformation extends to how you approach your work and creative endeavors. Instead of forcing yourself to be productive according to some external standard, you begin to move with your natural rhythms of energy and inspiration. You discover that creativity flows most freely when you're not trying to force it, when you create space for ideas to emerge rather than grinding them out through willpower. The writer who stops forcing themselves to write every day might find that when they do write, the words flow more easily and authentically. The artist who stops trying to create something impressive might discover their most moving work emerges from simple, honest expression. The entrepreneur who stops pushing so hard for success might find that opportunities appear naturally when they're focused on providing genuine value. This principle applies to every area of life where you've been trying too hard. The parent who stops trying to control their children's every choice often finds that their relationship improves and their children make better decisions. The person who stops desperately seeking a romantic partner often becomes more attractive and available for genuine connection. The individual who stops fighting their anxiety often finds that it loses its power over them. Think about the times in your life when you felt most alive, most at peace, most truly yourself. Chances are, these weren't moments when you were striving hardest or controlling most tightly. They were probably moments when you were fully present, completely absorbed in what you were doing, free from the exhausting mental commentary about how things should be different. Those moments offer a glimpse of what becomes possible when you stop fighting the current of life and learn to move with it instead. But how do you actually make this shift from forcing to flowing? How do you retrain a lifetime of habits built around control and resistance? The answer lies in understanding something that goes deeper than techniques or strategies. It requires recognizing that your very identity, the story you tell yourself about who you are and what you need to be happy, might be the source of your struggle. Most of us construct our sense of self around our achievements, our roles, our possessions, our relationships. We think we are our job title, our bank account, our reputation, our past successes and failures. But all of these are external circumstances that are constantly changing. When you base your identity on shifting sands, you're guaranteed to feel insecure and need to control everything to maintain your sense of self. Those who found genuine peace understand that you are not your circumstances. You are not your thoughts. You are not even your emotions. You are the awareness in which all of these experiences arise and pass away. This awareness doesn't need to be defended or improved or secured because it cannot be threatened by anything that happens in the external world. When you recognize this, something profound shifts in how you approach daily challenges. The meeting that doesn't go as planned stops feeling like a personal attack on your worth. The relationship conflict stops threatening your very existence. The financial setback stops defining your future possibilities. These events still matter, but they no longer carry the weight of your entire identity. This shift from identification with circumstances to identification with awareness itself is perhaps the most practical spiritual insight you can develop. It doesn't require you to believe anything or adopt any particular worldview. It simply asks you to notice what's actually happening in your direct experience. Right now, as you listen to these words, there's an awareness present that knows you're listening. This awareness doesn't struggle with the content or resist difficult ideas. It simply witnesses whatever arises with perfect openness. When you learn to rest in this awareness more frequently, you discover that it has qualities that your thinking mind lacks. It's naturally peaceful, infinitely spacious, and completely at ease with uncertainty. The more you practice returning to this aware presence, the less you feel compelled to force outcomes. You begin to trust that this intelligence that beats your heart and grows your hair and digests your food without any conscious effort on your part might also be capable of guiding your life in ways your limited thinking mind could never orchestrate. This doesn't mean you stop making plans or taking action. It means you hold your plans lightly and take action from inspiration rather than desperation. You move toward what energizes you rather than forcing yourself toward what you think you should want. You respond to opportunities rather than trying to create them through sheer willpower. Consider how differently you might approach your work if you weren't constantly worried about proving your worth or avoiding failure. Instead of exhausting yourself trying to anticipate every possible problem, you could focus your energy on doing excellent work and trusting that excellence will create its own opportunities. Instead of manipulating situations to get the outcomes you want, you could contribute authentically and allow the results to unfold naturally. This shift in approach often leads to better practical results than forcing ever did. When you're not tight with anxiety about outcomes, you think more clearly and see possibilities that stress blinds you to. When you're not desperately trying to control how others perceive you, you become more attractive and trustworthy. When you're not fighting against obstacles, you can find creative ways around or through them. But the real transformation isn't about getting better results. It's about discovering that your happiness doesn't depend on results at all. You can be equally at peace whether your plans succeed or fail, whether people approve of you or not, whether life gives you what you thought you wanted or something completely different. This might sound impossible if you're used to tying your emotional state to external circumstances, but it's actually a return to something you knew instinctively as a young child. Before you learned to judge and compare and strive, you were naturally present and curious about whatever was happening. You didn't need life to be different to be engaged with it. That capacity for wonder and acceptance isn't gone. It's just been covered over by layers of conditioning about how life should be and what you need to be happy. As you practice letting go of forcing, these layers begin to dissolve and your natural ease starts to emerge again. The process of unlearning force is often uncomfortable at first because it requires you to feel vulnerable in ways you've spent years avoiding. When you stop trying to control outcomes, you have to face the possibility that things might not go the way you want. When you stop defending your image, you have to risk being misunderstood or rejected. When you stop managing your emotions, you have to actually feel them. But this vulnerability, paradoxically, becomes a source of strength. When you're no longer afraid of uncertainty, you can take risks that lead to genuine growth. When you're no longer attached to being right, you can learn from every situation. When you're no longer trying to avoid pain, you can move through difficulties with grace instead of getting stuck in resistance. The relationships in your life transform when you approach them from this place of relaxed authenticity. Instead of trying to get love, approval, or security from others, you can simply offer your genuine presence. Instead of manipulating conversations to make yourself look good, you can listen deeply and respond honestly. Instead of keeping score or trying to change people, you can appreciate them as they are. This doesn't mean you become a doormat or lose your ability to set boundaries. Actually, the opposite happens. When you're secure in your own being, you can say no when something doesn't feel right without guilt or explanation. You can walk away from situations that don't serve you without drama or resentment. You can speak your truth without needing others to agree with you. People often discover that when they stop trying so hard to be liked, they become more genuinely likable. When they stop performing to impress others, they become more interesting. When they stop managing their relationships, their connections become deeper and more authentic. But perhaps the most profound shift happens in your relationship with time itself. When you're constantly trying to force the future to arrive faster or the present moment to be different, you miss the only time when life actually happens. You spend your days mentally rehearsing conversations that might never occur, worrying about problems that may never materialize, and replaying past events that can't be changed. Living this way is like trying to enjoy a beautiful sunset while constantly checking your watch to see when it will be over. You miss the actual experience because you're so focused on what comes next or what you think should be happening instead. When you stop forcing and start flowing, you naturally become more present. You notice details you used to miss. You taste your food more fully. You listen to conversations without planning what you'll say next. You feel the texture of each moment instead of rushing through your days toward some imagined future satisfaction. This presence isn't a technique you have to practice. It's what naturally emerges when you stop resisting what's actually happening. Your attention is no longer scattered across past regrets and future anxieties because you're not trying to escape the present moment. The irony is that when you finally stop trying to get somewhere else, you discover that where you are is actually quite wonderful. The life you've been rushing through in your hurry to reach some better future turns out to be rich with meaning and beauty that you simply weren't noticing. Are you ready to experiment with this radically different approach to living? Can you imagine what your life might look like if you stopped trying to force outcomes and started trusting the intelligence that already flows through every moment? What would change if you quit exhausting yourself trying to be perfect and allowed yourself to be real? The invitation isn't to change everything at once, but to begin noticing where you're swimming against the current and gently experimenting with turning around and flowing with the stream instead. Start small. Choose one area where you've been forcing and see what happens when you relax your grip just a little. Notice how it feels in your body when you stop pushing and start allowing. Pay attention to what emerges when you create space instead of filling every moment with effort. This is how transformation happens, not through more trying, but through the radical experiment of trying less and trusting more. The life you've been working so hard to create may be waiting for you to stop chasing it and allow it to find you instead.